The committee will be in order, and I want to thank each of my colleagues for being here today. H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, and today is also an important day for us to remember and recognize our colleague Tom Cole, who is absent from the committee today. As we have seen for the last few days, there have been storms across the United States, and yesterday Chairman Cole's home district was struck, and so he is back home in his district helping his constituents from the devastating storm that came through the town of Moore, Oklahoma yesterday. And of course I watched, and I'm sure many other members did, the loss of life and the tremendous gallantry that took place on the part of first responders and others responding to their fellow citizens in the time of need. I also saw former colleague, the governor of the state of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin, as she stood valiantly saying that they would stay after the work until every single person was properly accounted for. So today we remember our work, one of our colleagues that is there in the face of this disaster, Chairman Cole. Additionally, I also want to share the committee's condolences with our former colleague, the gentleman who I sat next to for many years, Lincoln Diaz-Balart, whose son passed away yesterday in Florida. And his 29-year-old son was very important to Christine and Lincoln. And our thoughts and prayers with Lincoln and his family at this very, very difficult time. That also is something that hits this congressional family hard. Every single one of us have family members and children who we love very much, and we're up trying to do work here, and we know that our children back home miss us, and we miss them also, along with our families. This afternoon we have an opportunity to consider legislation that would help create tens of thousands of jobs and inject billions of dollars into our national economy. For over 5 years, the American people have waited for President Obama and his administration to approve the construction of the Keystone Pipeline. Unfortunately, the approval process has been marred by indecision and unnecessary, I believe, delays that virtually all other major environmental concerns surrounding the project have been addressed. Study after study has shown that the pipeline to be safe and effective and leading edge, and something that people in the communities and states where they would go across are fully supportive of. Plus, the transportation of this much-needed energy to American families and the American economy, as well as jobs, would be simply a way to position the United States of America to have a better opportunity to be self-sufficient in energy. When completed, the Keystone Pipeline will transport over 800,000 barrels of oil every day, equivalent to about half of our daily oil needs, and means that we could stop what we're getting from the Middle East. By approving this project, the federal government would bolster our energy security, reduce our dependence on foreign oil, create much-needed jobs, and provide billions of dollars in economic opportunities. So I want to take a minute and personally thank the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Terry, Congressman Terry, for bringing forth not just this bill, but working it through committee and doing the things that would be necessary to make sure that what we hear today is on the side of success for the American consumer, the American family, and the freedom that we can have. Before I welcome our panel, I'd like to see if the gentleman from Massachusetts has an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, want to associate myself with your remarks with regard to the tragic situation in Oklahoma. And all of us are thinking of our colleague, Tom Cole, during this difficult time. And I can tell you that at our Democratic caucus meeting this morning, I think it is unanimous that we certainly will support anything, all that is necessary to provide relief to these people who have been victims of this terrible natural disaster. I think that's what a country needs to do in times of disaster. We need to come together and support one another. And I also want to extend my sympathies to our former colleague Lincoln Diaz-Balart on the loss of his son. I know this It must be a terribly difficult time for him and his wife. As far as the underlying bill before us, this is the eighth time that we have voted on this issue, and I don't think there's anything that I can say or anybody else can possibly say that has already been said 8 times on this issue. So with that, I yield back the balance of my time and hope we get on with this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman's comments. I hope that we do have new news today, in that I hope we're going to hear that all environmental concerns have been cleared, and that we feel like we're ready and willing to see progress. I'd like to welcome, if we can, to the table today, first of all, the chairman of the T&I committee, the gentleman making his first appearance as the young chairman of the committee, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Bill Schuster. Secondly, my dear friend, Bobby Rush, who I would ask to come to the table and join us. And Mr. Rush, thank you so much for taking time, not only being with us today, but lending a strong voice as you choose. The gentleman, Mr. Whitfield. And I would also ask the gentleman, Mr. Terry, to come to the table. And as always, I know each of you have prepared comments without objection. Those will be entered into the record. And the debate that you would choose to have, we'll be prepared for. I'd like to ask if you could turn on, as you're preparing to speak, those mics. They allow the committee to hear you a little bit better. And at this time, I'd like to ask the gentleman from Pennsylvania if he would please be our lead witness. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to testify. And we are testifying today on the rule for consideration of H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, which allows construction of the Keystone XL pipeline to proceed. As you know, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee marked up the bill on May 16th and reported it favorably to the House by a vote of 33 to 24. Members have had ample opportunity to be heard on the bill. Furthermore, it was passed without amendment and with bipartisan support. Pipelines are the energy lifelines that power nearly all our daily activities. The hallmark of America's 2.5 million mile pipeline network continues to be that it delivers extraordinary volumes of product reliably, safely, efficiently, and economically. Pipelines are the safest and most cost-effective means to transport products that fuel our economy. In fact, pipelines supply more than 2/3 of the energy used in the United States. The Keystone XL project will be a critical addition to this extensive network, increasing our nation's supply of oil and thus helping to reduce the cost of the fuel used in the transportation sector. H.R. 3 is a common-sense bill that allows the construction, maintenance, and operation of the Keystone XL pipeline to move forward. The pipeline has been subject to extensive environmental reviews already conducted, and it is, in fact, the most studied pipeline in history. The bill would require no presidential permit process for the approval of the pipeline and therefore avoids further political delays of the project. Of particular interest to taxpayers, this pipeline doesn't require one federal dollar to build. Further, the very nature of infrastructure creates jobs, and Keystone is no exception. The U.S. State Department estimates that the Keystone XL will produce 42,000 jobs that will not be created unless the project moves forward. This project will have a significant positive economic impact, including an estimated $3.3 billion in direct expenditures for construction, materials, and $2.1 billion in earnings. Finally, as noted throughout the process, Keystone XL would be the safest pipeline ever constructed, and it should be approved without further delay. So I look forward to working with you to move H.R. 3 through the Congress. I thank you, and I yield back.
Chairman, thank you very much, not only for your time here, but also for your important leadership throughout the years that you have provided. That comes also from your father, who I knew very, very well, and he would be very proud if Bud were here today to see you to do this and this job that not only he held, but also you're making look way too easy.
Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman that sponsored the bill. Now at this time, the gentleman, Mr. Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and acting ranking member, Mr. McGovern. So pleased to be here on H.R. 3. It's frankly been a long time coming. Most of us know the legislative history of this, that we've tried this before in the past of having it forcing the president to make a decision. We know that resulted in a denial. But the reality is the time has come to make a decision. It's been long enough. Just to put it in context, last week was the anniversary of Lewis and Clark starting their trek. It took them 1,100 days to go to Oregon, explore, and come back. We're just shy of 1,700 days of waiting for the Keystone permit to be issued. And this has happened before in the past, and I'll get to that. But what is the Keystone Pipeline? We've named this the Northern Route Approval Act because the President has already deemed or blessed the Southern Route. But the Southern Route becomes somewhat irrelevant, not totally, but somewhat, if we can't access the third largest pool of oil in the world, which just happens to be a couple hundred miles north of our border in Canada, our greatest trading partner and probably best friend in the world, and which has been proven by Prime Minister Harper even coming here just a short time ago to reiterate their interest in selling the oil to us instead of China. So this pipeline, as the Chairman of Transportation mentioned, is the most studied. What do we mean by that? There's been several environmental studies done on this, 15,000 pages worth. All have concluded the same, that there are no, well, I didn't say no, but it's a technical, legal term of art, no significant impact to the environment. They spelled out what should be done to make it the safest pipeline. PHMSA, the pipeline agency, has said that they've reviewed it and signed off on its safety. That 35 additional requirements above the standards for pipelines were agreed upon by TransCanada, making it the new standard for pipelines. This is the safest pipeline ever constructed. So after almost 1,700 days of waiting, the politics surrounding this, it's time to get this done. Now, one last point. There's some other areas because we figured out, okay, if we deem this permit, what are the other ways they could delay? And we went back to a particular act, the Natural Gas Pipeline Act that became law in 2004, and basically stole the contents or reused the verbiage in that act to kind of shore up the areas where they could delay further. So we're deeming the studies that have already been done as adequate. There's a few others on jurisdiction of suing that, you know, you can't just abuse the court system, put all of your rights or specific lawsuits into one. We'll give you that time. Again, that's been done by a couple different acts before. So none of this is new, broken ground here. You may have some people testify that this is new. It hasn't. We copied it all. We weren't that creative. We said what's worked in the past, and that's what's in this bill. So I encourage you to support it as is, and we'll yield back my time, and once again, thank you.
Mr. Terry, thank you very much. The gentleman from Illinois, my dear friend, Mr. Rush, welcome to the committee. And Bobby, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm delighted. I don't know if this is the first time you've come up to see your good friend at the Rules Committee. I know you miss David, but you've got another good friend here now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not my first time being here. You are a good friend, and I have a particular bill that once we're out of session in terms of the committee, I still want you to sign on to it.
Yes.
Because I think it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Well, that's a bill we talk about a lot, and I do appreciate your confidence that at some point I'll have the ability to get that done.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
delighted that you're here today, Bobby, and the gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, ranking member, McGovern, all the other members of this very, very great committee, any way you look at this bill, this is a bad bill. It's a bad bill for the pipeline industry. It's a bad bill for the citizens of the nation. this is a bad bill for members of Congress. This bill, H.R. 3, is even more extreme than the Keystone XL pipeline bill that was passed out of the House in 2011. H.R. 3 grants a regulatory earmark to a foreign company, TransCanada, exempting TransCanada's XL pipeline from all the federal environmental permitting requirements. There is no other company in this nation, no other company that has business before this Congress that have these kinds of procedures and are given this kind of privilege. Whether you support this bill or don't support this bill, this is really a bad bill. H.R. 3 tramples on our system of laws. The bill eliminates presidential authority to make a decision on the Keystone XL pipeline. This bill will require actions, affirmative actions between two nations, Canada and the U.S. But we are excluding the President of the United States from making a decision on how this nation will interact with another nation. This bill views all environmental requirements met and all the issues pertinent to this pipeline. We deem all these permits as being issued. Essentially, H.R. 3 says that our nation's environmental laws might apply to every other company in this nation, but they don't apply to TransCanada, and they don't apply to the Keystone XL pipeline. TransCanada should not be let off the hook for taking reasonable precautions to minimize loss of wetlands and harm to migratory birds. Every other company that operates in America has to satisfy those requirements. Why shouldn't TransCanada? This bill is not only a bad bill because it excludes the presidential decision-making process, but also this bill is unnecessary. The State Department is conducting its review in a thorough and methodical manner, as it should with a project of this scope and a project that has this much controversy associated with it. The State Department issued a draft supplemental environmental impact statement on the pipeline, and more than 1 million Americans submitted comments. After the State Department considers these comments and issues a final environmental impact statement, the President has 90 days to issue a final decision. The State Department's review process is on track. But this bill, H.R. 3, requires that the review process, all the other requirements of the environmental studies don't matter. That this bill just does what is already done by FIAT. I have particular concerns about the provision in the bill that requires that any challenge to a federal action related to the Keystone XL pipeline were heard solely by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, rather than the usual courts of jurisdiction. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this excessively denies access to a foreign law by anyone who cannot afford to hire a D.C. lawyer and come here to pursue their claims. Local landowners will be prohibited and will have to make extraordinary conditions before they can file a claim. Small businesses, concerned citizens. If my constituents in Chicago had a problem wanting to file a claim, they would have to get here to D.C. in order to file a claim. This doesn't apply to any other company in the nation. So why are we carving out a special provision for Keystone? Is this an example of a rational, knows-best mentality that my Republican colleagues largely oppose? Mr. Chairman, Representative Jackson Lee, McCoy, and Chu and I have filed an amendment to strike this provision from the bill. And it's my burning desire, and out of enormous respect for this committee, I urge you to make my amendment in order. During the committee's consideration of the bill, we also heard many other concerns raised about the Keystone XL pipeline. Ranking Member Waxman and others are particularly concerned about the climate change impacts of this pipeline, which will expedite the development of tar sands and increase U.S. carbon pollution. Other members raised concerns about other potential impacts of the pipeline, such as oil spills along the pipeline route and emissions from refineries processing the tar sands oil. They have also displayed assertions that the U.S. needs this oil, as our dependence on foreign oil is falling with more efficient vehicles and more exorbitant U.S. production. Mr. Chairman, other members of the committee, I urge you to make as many of my colleagues' amendments in order as possible, so that we can have a robust debate on the various issues surrounding this pipeline. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I know that you share the same fundamental beliefs that I do on a number of different things. And the one thing that you and I can agree is that this is a nation of laws, and that this company, Keystone XL Pipeline, the Keystone XL Company, Trans-Canada, that they should not be exempt from the laws of this nation. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Rush, thank you very much. Your enthusiasm for being here today and your service to this great nation and your district is appreciated. And for you to join the podium today with these other gentlemen is helpful to the Rules Committee, not only my colleagues to hear from you, but also the perspective that you take. I'm delighted that you're here today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now welcome, if I can, the gentleman from Kentucky, the gentleman who probably knows more about this pipeline as a result of his duties within the Energy and Commerce Committee as the subcommittee chairman. And I want to thank Mr. Whitfield not only for keeping me up to date for the last few really months on this issue, but for him appearing today and for his leadership in this issue. And gentlemen from Kentucky is recognized.
Well, Chairman Sessions, thank you very much, and Mr. McGovern, thank you, and the members of the Rules Committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here and discuss H.R. 3 sponsored by Mr. Lee Terry. It goes without saying that there hasn't been any pipeline ever proposed in America that has gone through the environmental studies and impacts that this pipeline has gone through. I'm not going to repeat what other members have said. I would just like to make a couple of points. Number one, we're talking about a $7 to $8 billion project. Not one dime of government money will be in this project. We're talking about labor unions who've come to our committee and testified repeatedly about the number of jobs that will be produced by this pipeline. Initially, like 20,000 is the number that they use at a time when our economy is struggling. Number three, many of our friends on the other side of the aisle who have their legitimate reasons for opposing this pipeline have done so because of a memo written by Philip Verliger entitled The Tar Sands Road to China. And in that document, he talks about, number one, that much of the oil that would be coming from Canada would be exported to Asia. And the second point that he makes in his paper is that gasoline prices in America would actually go up. I point to his paper because subsequent to that, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy Analysis at the U.S. Department of Energy wrote a memorandum in response. And in response, he said very clearly, gasoline prices in all markets would decrease, including the Midwest, because of this pipeline. He also concluded it by saying that there's absolutely no economic incentive to be shipping Canadian oil sands to Asia. And I point that out because we've had so many hearings, so many discussions about those 2 points, and this is a memo that goes into great detail to show, in the opinion of the Department of Energy, that those are not valid fears. A third point that I would make, because in one of our hearings, one of the diligent members of the committee raised the issue that that steel produced in America would not be going into this pipeline because TransCanada had already purchased the steel from abroad. I have the testimony here where that comment was made. Subsequent to that hearing, the TransCanada people came in and refuted that. They pointed out very clearly that the steel that would be used in this pipeline, with the exception of about 5%, would be coming from American sources. So finally, I would say this. The reason the pipeline has not been built already is because of President Obama. And he has the authority to prevent it. But the American people in all the polling showed that they support it. Lower gas prices, jobs would be created, less dependence on foreign oil. And I, for one, am happy to support this pipeline. And I think it has already been said that the Pipeline Regulatory Agency over DOT has installed more safety requirements on this pipeline than any pipeline that has ever been built in America. So I would respectfully request that we bring this bill to the floor, and I hope that the U.S. Congress will pass it, and I hope the U.S. Senate will pass it. Thank you.
Mr. Whitfield, thank you very much. I would just say my observations, notwithstanding comments that any number of people have made today, that I believe, in fact, the President is having a difficult time making decisions. And I think the President of America should be a leader, not an indecision maker. And I have seen Secretary of State, Mrs. Clinton, offer a recommendation on this. And I saw the President sit on it. I saw us get a new Secretary of State. I saw the new Secretary of State, the gentleman, say he would move expeditiously on this matter. The facts of the case are that this President seems to have a very difficult time making decisions across the board on a number of things. He's uninformed about major things that are happening in the administration to the American people, whether it be the IRS, whether it be Secretary Sebelius, whether it be constitutional issues with wiretapping. This President seems to be out of touch. This President seems to be aloof. He's incapable of making a decision, does not want to. He defers things for months and months and months. And quite honestly, I think this is just another issue that we're seeing this President have problems performing his job. And job performance as President of the United States, as the world leader, means that the American people will continue to get second-rate leadership from a person who is incapable of making a decision. And so I hope that what Mr. Terry is doing here today, as well as each of you, Mr. Whitfield and Mr. Schuster, is to encourage and give him new thoughts and ideas about another way to approach it and to get this done. The American people, the success of the American people and our ability to pay for energy at the pump is directly at issue here. And I will tell you, gasoline's too high. Gasoline under President Obama has doubled in price. Food prices have doubled. We're seeing an enormous amount of people who simply cannot pay their bills. 25 million people unemployed or underemployed. And it comes as a direct result of the policies of the President of the United States. So lead, follow, or get the heck out of the way. I'm glad Mr. Terry has done what he has done today, and I'm delighted that each of you are here today to offer your testimony as you see fit on this. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pardon me. Mr. Rush, I just had a couple of questions for you. I listened to your testimony, and lots of things in there that appeal to me as a young conservative, talking about special legal provisions in this bill that aren't applicable to other items, talking about special regulatory processes and expeditions that are not applicable elsewhere. The President has the authority to approve this pipeline on his own without any of this additional legislation. Is that your understanding?
Mr. Moore, I'm trying to really wrap my arms around your question. Would you please rephrase your question?
Absolutely. You mentioned lots of the reasons you opposed this legislation, many that did not speak to the underlying goal here, which is trying to achieve American energy independence, but spoke to the methodology this bill used to try to take us a step in that direction. If we removed those provisions, the District Circuit Court legal decision-making authority, for example, the regulatory changes made by the bill, if we removed all those provisions such that this was just a bill that authorized a pipeline to take us a step towards energy independence, would you be able to support that piece of legislation?
If that were to occur, then what I would do is consider my support at that particular time. But we're dealing with really what could be or what may be, and the issue before the committee, as I understand it, is the U.S. Congress abrogating the powers of the presidency. And I might add, there have been a lot of listed charges against the president, and then I think that what I'm hearing, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that the chairman says that the president has been violating his office, and is incapable of governing. And so maybe this is the agenda of the committee to not be discussing a pipeline, but to be discussing impeachment. So if the chairman feels as strong as he feels about the president and the president not being able to perform his duties, then I would just ask the chairman, why don't you issue some a bill to consider impeaching him if you think he's that horrible for the nation, and let the American people decide whether or not he's up to the job or how he's been performing. But other than that, I just think that the sentiments that I've heard so far are just, sentiments that of sore losers. That's basically what I feel.
Well, my concern is the sore losers. It's not so much that they're sore, as that they're they're impoverished. It's the American people who'd like to have lower energy costs, and we have an opportunity with our friend to the north to be a replacement for the oil we receive from our friends to the east that don't particularly care for us all that much. I won't try to characterize the chairman's statements about the president's effectiveness, but I will say I've only been in Congress 2 years and 4 months. Who was telling me how long the pipeline has been under consideration? Was that you, Mr. Terry?
Yeah, 1,700 days.
1,700 days. And
1998.
I guess my question, Mr. Rush, listen,
I may make a
I'm
point. The application was filed September 2008.
2008. I'm a small government conservative. I don't relish coming to the Rules Committee and passing new federal legislation. I just as soon keep it off the books altogether. But if 1,700 days isn't enough, what's the right answer? I mean, in 1,800 days, will he be ready to make a decision? In 1,900 days, is that going to be the right number? Maybe it's going to be 2,000. Do you believe a decision is imminent? I understand what you're saying about this getting into the president's decision-making authority. I don't think Mr. Terry relishes that choice. I just don't know what other choices we have if we want to see a project move forward. We haven't gotten a yes, but we hadn't gotten a heck no either. We're in this pipeline limbo that now is going on 6 years.
Mr. Chairman, if I recall, we've been on this path before. The House passed a much more considerate bill than mine, even though it was extreme at the time it passed out, in my own humble opinion. However, it didn't go anywhere in the Senate, and it certainly didn't reach the President's desk. So I don't think that this bill is going to see the light of day. And so I think that we are here really, this is an exercise, not just in futility, but it's a feeling exercise of some frustrated individuals who have just an animalistic dislike and disregard for the President of the United States. And I don't think that any other president would be subjected to these kinds of processes and procedures. And I just kind of think that notwithstanding the personality, whether the president is aloof or whether the president is vigorous, notwithstanding the personality of the President of the United States, this Congress should not they are attempting to shortcut or short-circuit the authority and the powers of the President, especially when it comes to making treaties with other nations. It's never been done before since I've been here. And I've been here not 2 years, but 20 years, and I've served under many presidents, and I've never seen anything like this before in my life.
It's no wonder there's a degree of frustration if 1,700 days is the short-circuiting of the process. The long-circuiting would be distant. But I want to ask Mr. Terry, because I'm concerned about and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mr. Rush, but if President Bush had been sitting on this application for 1,700 days, would you be willing to sit back and not push this forward, or would you push this forward irrespective of personalities in the White House?
Yeah, that's an interesting hypothetical, but I think that President Bush would have signed the permit a long time ago. The issue here is that there are some special interest groups that want this either killed or delayed to the point where it's de facto killed. And we talk about this being somewhat new. I'd mention that our bill is based off of a 2004 with the pipeline, natural gas pipeline. Let's go back to 1973 with the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. In 1973, Congress passed and President Nixon signed the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Authorization Act. The purpose, as stated in that act, was to ensure that because of the extensive governmental studies already made of this project and the national interest in early delivery of North Slope oil to domestic markets, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline be constructed promptly without further administrative or judicial delay or impediment. So in fact, there's been 2 other times in our American history where administrative delays, not as long as this one that we're looking at, existed, and at both times, just like we're asking now, Congress had to come in and deem it permitted, and it went on with its construction.
That's incredibly helpful, Mr. Chairman. There's no question that I have the sense this legislation is necessary, but to hear that not only it's the only thing that's unprecedented here is the unprecedented delay in approval, not Congress's step. I will just say to my friends, last week we had a lot about Pay China First legislation, which I thought was an inaccurate label, but opposition here certainly seems to be a fuel China First mantra, and I hope we don't end up in that road. Let's use this energy right here in America. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields time. Gentleman, Massachusetts.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, let me thank all the witnesses for coming, and I want to associate myself with Mr. Rush. I agree with him on this position. I would just simply say that there's nothing that, to my understanding, that guarantees that the oil that comes through this Keystone Pipeline will stay in the United States. In fact, there's everything to believe that it may be going to China or someplace else. We can argue about what that does to oil prices, but and we make comparisons about previous agreements under President Nixon, and let's go back to the beginning of our country. I mean, a lot of things have changed. I think we're a little bit more environmentally sensitive today than we were way back then. But look, we have been through this 8 times, and I like everybody on the panel too much to torture you with the same questions that I've raised 8 times before. We'll have our opportunity to be able to debate this on the floor tomorrow, and people can say whatever they want to say. This is what it is, and we might as well move on with it. I would just say that I'm looking that there are a number of amendments that have been requested. My hope is that I'd like to have an open rule, but we don't do open rules here anymore. So I'd like to hope that everybody who actually submitted an amendment can have it be made in order, and we can go to the floor tomorrow and do whatever people want to do. So thank you for coming. I yield back my time.
Appreciate the gentleman's comments. And as a matter of fact, the gentleman did allude to a number of amendments that had been presented to the Rules Committee. And in fact, that is correct. Wide-ranging views from our members have been considered, and Republicans and Democrats, our staff, have worked through very carefully on this. And I'm delighted to acknowledge the receipt of a good number of those. And I thank the gentleman for his comments. Gentleman, Mr. Nugent is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. And maybe you're aware of this, or maybe you're not, but the President yesterday stood in front of a manufacturing outfit, a dredge company. And I think he talked almost specifically about regulations and red tape and delays and permits and how the federal government really should expedite those things. And interesting, the company he spoke to, I think the day before, the president of that company testified about the importance of the Keystone Pipeline. How many studies have been done, EPA studies, on this particular issue? Just for clarify.
There's been the main, there was a supplemental, and then a second supplemental, and the total's about 15,000 pages between the 3.
So, I mean, it almost sounds like exactly what the President was talking about. It would have been nice if he would just said, well, let's get this done. And so I appreciate your legislation. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman, Mr. Post, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may briefly testify on 2 amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the amendments I am the co-author of, along with Ms. Judy Chu of California, requiring the GAO to conduct a study of the pipeline to determine the projected costs of cleanup from potential oil spills on public health, impact, environment, and the amount of water available for farmers and municipalities. I think it's very consistent with the direction this House has gone. I recall some bills talking about costs and benefits This simply adds a GAO study about the costs of this bill, and I hope that it will be allowed. I'd also like to speak briefly on the Peters amendment, Representative Gary Peters, which again does not block the pipeline in any way, but orders a study related to the anticipated increase in refining of tar sand oils. And again, I think these are bills that don't affect the fundamental direction of the bill, but would ensure that we had good information regarding costs and benefits and impact. And I encourage the committee to allow the Peters amendment and the Chu-Polis amendment.
Does gentleman yield back his time? Thank you very much for your feedback about both those amendments, perhaps the third. And in fact, I will tell you that we have taken time to be very deliberative, both on the Republican and the Democrat side, to work together on enumerating a way to make those in order as can be. And I would thank the gentleman for his comments. Gentleman, Mr. Webster is recognized. Gentleman has no questions. Gentleman, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, of course, being on the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Energy, this is a subject with which I have some familiarity. But prior to serving on the Rules Committee, I was on the Joint Economic Committee for 2 terms. And it seems like in 2011, shortly after the majority changed hands in the House of Representatives, the President's Jobs Council spoke at the Joint Economic Committee, and this was one of their #1 items to get the Keystone Pipeline approved. I note in the Statement of Administration Policy, which came to us and was shared with us, that it's noted that the environmental impact statement issued by the Department of State on August 26, 2011. So that's been some time ago. At this point, I just fail to see what the holdup is. And Mr. Whitfield, I'd like to ask you if I could. I mean, you've served in Congress longer than I have. You've served with other administrations. What would the Clinton administration have done with the Keystone Pipeline? Would they have approved this project?
Well, it's a little bit, I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I genuinely believe that President Clinton would have approved this pipeline.
Yeah, I think so too, and I am at a loss to explain why the President has been moved so slow on this when, after all, job creation has been one of the main things that we've all been concerned about since the start of the recession. So I appreciate everyone being here. I would just note in the Committee on Energy and Commerce, we've had multiple hearings, multiple markups in both subcommittee and full committee on the Keystone Pipeline. It's been well vetted, and it's high time it came to the floor, and it's high time the President approved this project. So thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burgess. Gentleman, Mr.
Chairman,
comment.
there's a couple of questions related to me. So listen, the cost of fuel, of petroleum costs, have really been under this president. And one of the costs the most considerably of this president. So I think there is no command for us to continue to charge the president and this administration with increasing the cost of oil. And as you know, as many others know, that the cost of import petroleum is not in the jurisdiction of the powers or the authority of the president. The market, the global marketplace sets the price of oil, which we're able to respond to. That's one area. But I really sincerely this career on the subject of jobs. My district suffers from intergenerational joblessness. Unemployment is the #1 concern of my constituents. There are members of my family who have been out of work now for upwards of 5 years. So I am very much attuned to the jobless condition, the unemployment condition that so many of the American citizenry is confronted with. I, along with Martin Kessler, 2 Congresses ago, created a caucus. Mr. Chairman, you might have even signed on to the caucus called the Jobs Now Caucus, fighting for jobs. So, but on the issue of jobs in the Keystone XL pipeline, industry don't agree how many jobs are going to be created. The proponents don't agree on exactly how many jobs will be created, and the opponents don't agree. We don't know how many jobs will be created by Keystone. And so I have to separate the jobs issue, because I am for jobs. I was sent here to fight for jobs. I'm for jobs. And if Keystone can, once a decision is made, if we can live up to its promise, then I'm certain that members of my constituents will be knocking on the door, fighting for those jobs. But this issue is not just about jobs. This issue is about the presidency of the United States and the powers, the vested powers that they have to engage in international diplomacy and to engage in treaty-making for this nation. And I think that this is an aggravation of their power. And I can see us shamelessly and recklessly rushing to deny the president that power and that authority, because President Obama will be president 2.5 years from now. But whoever the president is, whether it's George Bush, Bill Clinton, or whoever it is, or Barack Obama, I don't want to be party to any efforts that will aggravate and that will mismanage the power of the president, the elected president of the United States. And I think that's where we are. 1,700 days is just accurate. I'm not sure if it's accurate or not. But look at what we haven't done as a Congress is 1,700 days. And I don't see anyone saying that we should be kicked out of office because we haven't passed a budget, or we haven't done passed a farm bill, or we haven't passed other kinds of meaningful legislation in over 1,700 days. Nobody is tearing down our doors and demanding that we abandon our responsibility while down our position as members of Congress. Hate not being race. And I just wish that we had been a little more careful when President Bush decided that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and we had to try to slow down, take more time, be more deliberate. What are the real facts here? But now we don't rush toward judgment and gave him an open vote and just found him mentally down a path that we all will be forever saddened by. So it's really not about jobs for me. It's really about the presidency. If in fact the president, when he approves this, if there jobs will be created, you and I, Mr. Warren, will be in intense competition to make sure that you want to make sure that your constituents get those jobs, and I'm going to be right there making sure that my constituents gets jobs, because jobs is the number one issue in my district. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Rice, thank you very much. The opportunity for the four of you to appear before the Rules Committee is on our side much appreciated. I would like to note that your staffs have provided us with a lot of not only good information, I've seen regular information that's been provided to our membership, credible things that are based upon the facts of the case instead of non-emotional arguments, but rather common sense, balanced approaches, facts of the case. And I would like to thank each of you for your attention to that detail and insisting that be done also. I want to thank all four of you for being here, and you're all at this time excused. Thank you very much. This time I'd like to welcome the second panel. I see the gentlewoman Carol Shea Porter from New Hampshire, and I see the gentleman Randy K. Weber, Sr. from Texas, and I'd like to ask both of them to come forward at this time with the anticipation that we may have one other member who may be joining us at some point to give testimony. I'd like to welcome the gentleman, Mr. Weber, your first time to the Rules Committee. Welcome. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to say thank you to both of you for taking time not only for your ideas but also your time that you'll be here today. We're very interested in your testimony. Without objection, anything you have in writing will be entered in the record, and the gentlewoman at this time would be recognized for her testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the Rules Committee for your time today. I appear in support of my proposed amendment to H.R. 3, which would clarify that nothing in this Act approves or authorizes any proposed pipeline activity between Portland, Maine, and Montreal, Canada. Regardless of how one views the Keystone XL pipeline, my amendment simply clarifies that the expedited process made available for Keystone will not be used to short-circuit any environmental review for possible changes to the Portland to Montreal pipeline. It is possible that there may be an attempt to reverse the flow in this aging pipeline, which was designed in 1916 to transport fuel from Portland to Montreal in order to transport Canadian tar sands out to the Atlantic. My constituents have significant concerns about the potential environmental and economic impact such a decision would have on the region. That is why I have pressed the Department of State to ensure that any attempts to reverse the pipeline will be subject to a complete and thorough environmental impact statement. As it is, I remain deeply concerned that the State Department's 2008 review was highly inadequate. Regardless, this process has not been subject to the type of review that we have seen with the Keystone Project and should be handled separately. That is why I have offered this amendment, which would clarify that nothing in the underlying Act approves or authorizes any pipeline activity between Montreal and Portland. I hope you will find it in order to be brought to the floor for consideration. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Weber is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Is that mic turned on?
It is now.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you betcha. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in favor of my proposed amendment to H.R. 3. This amendment would add to the bill important findings regarding the safety and environmental soundness of the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. In fact, part of the testimony is going to be from the State Department's very findings about this pipeline. 2 weeks ago, the House Science Committee held a hearing to examine the key scientific and technical aspects of the pipeline and review the State Department's findings in those areas. In its assessment, the State Department concluded that scientific research indicated that the pipeline would be both safe and environmentally sound. In fact, it concluded that the Keystone XL pipeline would have a degree of safety over any other domestic pipeline. Now, this is our very own State Department. And let me tell you about the pipeline industry, and if you haven't read up on it a little bit. Of course, the pipeline comes into my district, so I'm keenly aware that we want those jobs. The pipeline industry has a 99.9925% safety rating. So I asked the witnesses in the hearing, all four of them, do you know of any other industry that has that kind of safety rating? And without exception, they all four said no. My amendment would simply add to the bill's findings details relevant to these important conclusions. These additional findings illustrate that in addition to the multiple reasons we should proceed with the project, ranging from energy security to economic growth, the project should be approved because, number one, it actually presents the safest way to transport oil. Did I mention they have a 99.99925 safety rating? Number two, it would have minimal impacts to resources along the proposed route and an extremely negligible impact on the purported climate change. These conclusions largely disprove the hyperbolic claims made by opponents of the project, and they're disproved by our very own State Department, a non-biased agency, obviously. Because my amendment would add key details on the extensive environmental assessment that has been conducted for Keystone XL and the State Department's conclusions relative to this work, I respectfully request that the committee allow my amendment to be made in order and considered by the House of Representatives with the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Appreciate the gentleman, not only his testimony, but him being here today. And we also would like to welcome the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee. As the gentlewoman knows, without objection, we'll accept anything in writing that she has, her statement, and we would recognize her for her comments that she would make to the committee at this
I thank the Chairman for his courtesies. We have just finished a Judiciary Committee markup, so I do appreciate the Rules Committee's courtesies as well. Just to lay a premise, has been working and reading about and meeting with persons on the Keystone Pipeline and view it as a valuable asset for the state of Texas and, frankly, for the nation, and hope that we will have an opportunity to be able to move forward on it, Mr. Chairman. I offer a few amendments, and I offer, again, a caveat, is that I wish that we had a process of diplomatic engagement. I've not heard from the leadership of the Canadian government to engage the President in a process that could move faster. I'm going to say that I think it could move faster. But I offer these amendments because I am concerned about the approach that this bill takes, which is to make exceptions for entities that are not even U.S. companies, companies that I have respect for because they are working here in the United States and they're doing joint ventures. So I've offered the following amendments, and I would say my preference would be is that we did something that would move the appropriate procedures forward, have the decision that needs to be made in the executive to be made, all of the environmental issues to be additionally reviewed. I think colleagues have already mentioned that the State Department have moved forward. So on the basis of that, I offer, I think, a number of amendments. Number one is an amendment that extends the time period for filing claims arising under the Act from 60 days to 1 year. Why would I do that? It's because the underlying bill does not allow for judicial review. If you lived in Wisconsin or if you're in Minnesota, you have to get all the way to the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. That's very difficult on an individual plaintiff, a small town, a small company. It is quite difficult, and I think the years 60 days is burdensome, and we won't see many people getting, if I might use a common phrase, getting their act together to try and bring a grievance to the Court of Appeals within 60 days. And I ask my colleagues to consider that amendment. Then something that I've worked on for a very long time and working with the industry on, and I think the industry recognizes as it changes from seasoned workers and they begin to retire, who've been in the business for 30, 40 years, that it is important to look to creating opportunities and identifying procedures and policies to ensure that women and minority business enterprises are afforded the opportunity to participate on an equitable basis in this major effort of construction and operation of the Keystone Pipeline. The purpose of this amendment is to provide Congress with information that it can conduct appropriate oversight, and it asks for a report within a 90-day period to the Secretary of Transportation. And I do believe that this is a jobs creator, but I can tell you in my community it is very difficult to get people connected to the industry, whether they're in a business or whether they're trying to get a job. Right now I'm working to have job fairs so that I can encourage young people to go into the industry who happen to be diverse. I hope that that amendment will be considered as one that helps all of us. I have an additional amendment that speaks to the non-sufferability clause, where it indicates that if one provision of this bill is found unconstitutional, since a lot of these protections are stripped out of this bill, then that means that all of the bill will be found unconstitutional. Again, I wish we weren't here writing legislation. I wish we were at a signing agreement that had been done through regular order of the process that is given to us through the executive. And I really think that that is the better approach. My other amendment. Amendment number 4 seeks to strike the provisions about lacking of judicial review and the structure of the Court of Appeals. And again, my point on that is that in most processes, legislation, you have judicial review. We do not have it. And so you cannot go to a district court wherever you live. And frankly, I think that is in wrong direction. I know we're eager to get the approval, and I understand that anxiety, and I understand many of the arguments that my friends have been making, but I don't think that's the way to do it, to take away rights that would be allowed. And so I'm asking that this provision be stricken and that we adhere to the normal, regular order that in most legislation it allows for the right kind of judicial review. And with that, I'll yield back my time.
Appreciate the gentleman's comments and for being here today. I do have one question for the gentlewoman from New Hampshire. And I would ask that you would just please restate what was in your testimony. You offered a critique of the Secretary of State or the original decision-making that was made by the Secretary. Could you amplify on that for just a moment for me, please?
Yes, thank you for asking me that. At the time, the study didn't compare the bitumen to a lighter crude oil, and so I think that this possible project, I mean, it was proposed in 2008 by the company Enbridge, and then because of the economy, you know, it was dropped. But we need a study that just focuses on this if they decide to do it. So what I want to do right now with this is to make sure that going forward with the Keystone Pipeline doesn't in any way suggest that this also would cover that each has to stand on its own merit and has to be studied before decisions are made.
I appreciate the gentleman clarification. Yeah. Thank you very much. Gentleman, Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, Ms. Shea Porter, what year did you say the pipeline, the Montreal?
My understanding was that it was designed in 1916.
1916.
Right.
That's almost 100 years of working with that technology. It's interesting. Mr. Chairman, I missed some of the first panel, and I came in here and found the Statement of Administrative Policy here at my desk, and I was wondering if anyone made this part of the record.
In fact, I have not.
Oh, because I find it interesting that it says the President would be recommended to actually veto this bill. That's unusual. Yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentlewoman, the gentleman, Mr. McGovern, is recognized.
I just want all the amendments to be made in order.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlewoman, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions.
Mr. Woodall.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank our new freshman colleague for coming up here. Lots of senior faces that have been here before, but the folks always ask me back home, do you have to be in Congress for a dozen years to make a difference? And I say, well, watch the Rules Committee. You're going to see folks up there who've been here measured in months and not years. So thank you for coming.
Mr. Nugent. No, Mr. Chairman, I do not. Mr. Webster. Dr. Burgess.
No, Mr. Chairman, but I also want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Weber, a fellow Texan, and look forward to him coming to the Rules Committee repeatedly in the future and spending time with us here, because this is where it all happens in the House of Representatives. Now, I yield back.
The committee appreciates all three of you for taking time to be here today. I would note that our chaplain showed up. Perhaps he felt like I needed some divine inspiration here today. I won't comment further about what he really thought, who I needed help with or from, but each of you have provided us with an opportunity to not only hear your thoughts and ideas, but I think a fair hearing and a chance for you to come to a body that we're seeking information to make wiser choices and better decisions. And I think that the committee today will, in fact, be allowed to do that because of the type of input that we've received. You're excused at this time, and I want to thank you very much for taking time to be here.
Thank you. Thank the Rules Committee. Thank you.
Chairman will be in the receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina, the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, a structured rule. The rule provides 90 minutes of general debate equally divided among and controlled by the respective chairs and ranking minority members of the committees on Transportation, Infrastructure, Energy and Commerce, and Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for purpose of amendment and an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-11 and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, shall not be subject to demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman, the Vice Chairman of the committee, and I'd like to ask Mr. Webster if he could explain the rule. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This rule is a structured rule. It provides for 90 minutes of debate controlled by the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Energy and Commerce, and Natural Resources. The rule makes in order 10 amendments, one Republican amendment, 9 Democrat amendments. Many of the amendments were duplicative in nature, and I'm sure we had to wrestle with that, but this allows for most of the major issues to be heard at least one time on the floor.
I appreciate the comments from the gentleman. As we have had questions around the dais today, there have been ideas suggested about amendments that would be made in order, and I would like to say that the committee did, the staff and the committee did attempt to recognize the importance of making an order, even some very important amendments that some colleagues who I might not normally be supportive of their amendments, that they were made in order today, and I think it helps the process. Is there further amendment or discussion at this time? Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 3 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor.
The chair would recognize the number of amendments that were made in order in the committee, and I would oppose the gentleman. Further discussion. Those in favor of the amendment by the gentleman from Massachusetts signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it.
I thought the ayes had it. But,
you know, sometimes there is a difficulty hearing in this body, and so the noes have it. Further discussion or amendment. The vote will now be on the motion made by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment, the motion is agreed to, and the gentleman from Florida, the gentleman, Mr. Webster, will be the manager for Republicans.
Mr. Polis, the minority.
And Mr. Polis for the minority. Our next meeting will be tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. on the student loan bill. And I want to thank each of the members for taking time to be here today. This committee is now done.